All right, let's dive into something pretty fascinating today, something that's really changing the way we work. We're talking about global workforce management, and specifically a company called Deel that's making waves in this space.
It's amazing to see how this whole remote work thing has just exploded.
Yeah.
And Deel seems to be right there at the forefront, helping companies navigate this new world.
They're definitely not just dipping their toes in the water, are they? The material we're looking at today comes straight from Deel's website, and it's clearly aimed at companies with big global ambitions.
Well, yeah, they're not shy about their goals. I mean, they're boasting about onboarding 500,000 workers worldwide already.
Yeah.
That's a pretty impressive number, to say the least.
Those are some serious numbers, and it's not just about the number of workers, it's the sheer scale of their operations. Over 35,000 companies, $10 billion in processed payroll. Those are not rookie numbers.
It's clear they're not just some niche player. They're building a platform that's designed for serious growth. And they're not just providing software, they're positioning themselves as a strategic partner for companies navigate this new world of work.
Okay, so let's break it down. What exactly does Deal do for these companies? They throw around a lot of terms. Payroll, compliance, hiring, onboarding, taxes, invoices, HRIS. It can be a bit overwhelming, to be honest.
I know, it's a lot to take in, but I think that's kind of the point. Think about the complexities of hiring someone, let's say, in Brazil, if your company's based in Canada.
Hmm.
Different labor laws, tax regulations, even cultural norms around employment contracts. It gets really complicated.
Right. So what Deal is doing is they're creating a single platform that handles all of that.
Exactly. They're streamlining the entire process, from hiring and onboarding to payroll and compliance. It's a one-stop shop for managing a global workforce, and that's a huge selling point for companies expanding internationally.
It sounds almost too good to be true. How do we know this isn't just, marketing hype?
Well, that's where the customer testimonials come in. And some of them were pretty compelling. Like Jad Baya, for example, he compared Deel to Remote.com, another big player in this space.
Yeah.
He actually said there's a massive gap in expectations versus reality, implying the Deel really lived up to the hype while others haven't.
Interesting. So it's not just about being a one-stop shop, it's about doing it well.
Exactly. And we see that sentiment echoed in other testimonials, too. Jeremy C., for instance, talked about how much simpler and easier Deel's payroll solution was compared to what they had before. And then there's Thomas L. He even said Deel made international payroll user-friendly, even though he had no prior experience with it.
So even if you're not a seasoned HR professional, Deal seems to make global workforce management pretty accessible.
That seems to be the consistent feedback. But let's dig a little deeper into the specifics, beyond just the testimonials. One of the areas they really highlight is global payroll. They claim to make paying people in 150 countries headache-free. I don't know about you, but the logistics of that alone make my head spin.
I know, right? It's not just about getting the money to the right place at the right time. It's about doing it in a way that complies with local laws and regulations in each of those 150 countries. It's mind-boggling.
Absolutely. And that's where features like global hiring come in.
Hmm.
Deel takes on the responsibility of navigating those often very confusing international labor laws so companies don't have to.
It's like they're taking all of that complexity and just handling it.
Exactly. They're essentially acting as a shield for companies, protecting them from the legal risks of global hiring. And that's a huge value proposition, especially for companies that are new to this whole global workforce thing.
And then there's Deal IT, which seems to go beyond just the HR stuff. They're talking about providing equipment, software, the whole shebang. It's almost like they're trying to create a virtual office environment no matter where your employees are physically located.
It's really interesting. It seems like they're recognizing that in a truly global workforce, you need to think beyond just payroll and contracts. You need to make sure everyone has the tools and resources they need to be productive, regardless of where they are.
It's almost like they're trying to level the playing field, making sure someone working from, say, a small town in India has access to the same resources as someone working from Silicon Valley.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And if you think about it in terms of talent acquisition, this can be a huge advantage for companies using Deel. It essentially expands their talent pool to the entire world.
Suddenly, that scale globally with velocity and ease slogan starts to make a lot more sense. It's not just about being able to hire anyone anywhere, it's about giving them the means to actually perform their job effectively wherever they may be.
Exactly. And it all ties back to their vision of enabling a truly global and connected workforce. And speaking of connected, let's talk about Deel HR. This is where they offer a centralized global HRIS, which is basically a system for managing all your employee data in one place.
Now, I know companies love their data these days, and being able to gather insights from that data is becoming more and more important. So, what's the big deal about having a global HRIS? What does that actually do for a company?
Well, imagine trying to get a clear picture of your workforce
Hmm.
when you have employees scattered across dozens of countries. You might have different systems for payroll, benefits, performance reviews.
Mm.
It could be a logistical nightmare.
Oh, I can imagine. Trying to make sense of all that data from different systems, different countries, different languages. It would be a headache for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where a global HRIS, like the one Deel offers, comes in. It brings all of that information together in one place, giving companies a unified view of their global team.
So it's not just about data collection, it's about data analysis and insights, right? Being able to see trends, identify potential issues, and ultimately make more informed decisions about your global workforce.
You got it. And it's not just about traditional HR functions either. They're incorporating performance management tools, even leveraging AI in some areas, which is pretty cutting edge.
Oh, yeah, I saw something about AI-powered performance management on their website. But what does that even mean? Is AI going to be writing performance reviews now?
Well, it's not quite that sci-fi just yet, but it's definitely an area to watch. Imagine a system that can analyze performance data from across your entire global workforce, identify patterns and trends, and even provide recommendations for coaching and development. That's the kind of power AI could bring to HR.
That's both fascinating and a little bit scary, to be honest. But it definitely shows that Deal is trying to stay ahead of the curve, not just keeping up with current trends.
Absolutely. And speaking of staying ahead of the curve, they also offer immigration support, which is a huge hurdle for companies wanting to attract global talent.
Yeah, navigating visa requirements and work permits can be a bureaucratic nightmare. Having a partner like Deal who can handle those complexities could be a major game changer for companies looking to expand globally.
It streamlines the process for sure, and it reduces the risk for businesses. It really brings us back to this idea of Deal as a trusted partner. They're not just selling software, they're selling peace of mind and expertise. They even offer support for complex things like mergers and acquisitions and entity setup, which suggests they're really aiming to be a strategic partner for companies with global ambitions.
So it's not just about transactions, it's about relationships and long-term support. They want to be there for companies every step of the way as they navigate the complexities of a global workforce. But with all these features and services, how do they ensure companies don't feel lost in the shuffle? We've all had those experiences with big companies where you feel like just another number.
Right, you don't want to get lost in the system.
Mm.
And they seem to address that directly in their materials. They emphasize things like dedicated support, fast response times, and even a dedicated point of contact for each company.
So they're trying to balance the benefits of a large established platform with the personalized attention of a smaller firm.
It seems that way. But one thing that also stood out to me was how much emphasis they put on security and compliance. They mentioned GDPR compliance, SOC 2 compliance, ISO 27001 certification. It's a whole alphabet soup of security acronyms.
Well, in today's world, with all the data breaches and cyber attacks we hear about, security is a top concern for any company, especially when you're dealing with sensitive employee data. So it makes sense that they'd want to highlight those certifications.
It's not just about buzzwords, though. These certifications actually carry a lot of weight. They demonstrate that Deel takes data security seriously and that they've been independently audited to prove it. For companies handling sensitive employee information, that's a big deal.
Okay, so it's not just about ticking off boxes. These certifications actually mean something. But for someone who's not a security expert, what do those acronyms actually mean in practical terms? What are the implications for a company using Deal?
Let's unpack that a little bit. Well, think of it this way. Would you trust a bank that didn't have proper security measures in place? Probably not right. These certifications are like Deal's way of saying, hey, we're serious about data security. We have the systems and the processes to keep your information safe, and to prove it, we've been independently audited.
So it's not just about marketing, it's about actually backing it up with real, verifiable proof.
Exactly. It builds trust, and it also reduces risk for the companies using Deel. If there were a data breach, they could point to those certifications and say, look, we did our due diligence. We chose a provider that met the highest security standards.
It's like a safety net, in a way.
Yeah, you can say that. But security is just one piece of the puzzle. What's really impressive, in my opinion, is how they're bringing all these different elements together. The payroll, the compliance, the HR systems, even the equipment and immigration support, and they're weaving it all into one unified platform.
It's like they're building an entire ecosystem for global employment. It's almost like a virtual nation state for the remote workforce.
That's a pretty interesting analogy, and it speaks to the scale of their ambition. They're not just trying to solve a few logistical problems here and there, they're trying to fundamentally change the way we think about work itself.
It's a pretty bold vision, to say the least. But it's still early days, right? How do we know if this idea of a global, borderless workforce is actually going to take hold?
Well, the trends are definitely pointing in that direction. The growth of remote work and the rise of global teams are undeniable. And when you see the kind of companies Deel is working with, over 35,000 of them from startups to major enterprises, it suggests that this isn't just some passing fad.
And they're not shy about sharing those success stories, are they? They have a whole section on their website dedicated to companies who have used Deel to build their global teams. Like Turing, for example. They were able to onboard hundreds of developers globally using Deel.
It's impressive. And it's not just tech companies either. They have examples from all sorts of industries. Telecommunications, translation services, even healthcare. They're really showcasing the versatility of their platform and its ability to adapt to different needs.
And one thing that keeps coming up in those testimonials is how user-friendly the platform is. Even people who aren't familiar with the ins and outs of global payroll or HR processes are saying it's intuitive and easy to navigate.
That's really key, because when you think about the complexity of what Deel is actually doing behind the scenes, managing compliance with labor laws in over 150 countries, it's amazing that they're able to make it feel so simple for the end user.
Right, it's like they've taken this incredibly complex system and put a really simple user-friendly interface on top of it.
Exactly. And that's a huge part of their appeal, especially for companies that are new to global hiring.
Mhm.
They don't want to spend months trying to learn a complicated software system. They just want to find the best talent, regardless of where those people are located.
And Deel makes it easy for them to do just that. It's like they've created the easy button for global workforce management.
You got it. But it's not just about being easy to use. They're also very clear about what they want you to do.
Yeah.
Their call to action is very straightforward. Book a call, add your people, and get dedicated onboarding support. It's a very clear path forward, designed to minimize friction and get companies up and running quickly.
They're not beating around the bush. They're saying, look, don't be intimidated by this whole global hiring thing. We've got this. We'll walk you through it.
Exactly. And that message is really resonating with companies, especially those who might be hesitant to take that first step into the world of global hiring.
Okay, so let's talk about that first step. Let's talk about Deel's approach to global compliance, which seems to be a major focus for them.
It is a major focus, and for good reason. Global compliance is a minefield, and they're positioning themselves as the experts who can navigate it for you.
They have a whole section on their website dedicated to compliance. It's clear they see it as a key differentiator. But what does that actually mean in practice? What are they doing differently?
It's not just about checking boxes and making sure you're meeting the bare minimum requirements. They seem to have a really deep understanding of the nuances of global employment law, and they're constantly monitoring those laws for changes.
So it's not a static thing, it's a constantly evolving process.
Exactly. And that's where Deel's expertise really comes in. They have a whole team of legal experts who are constantly monitoring changes in legislation and updating their platform to make sure their clients are always in compliance.
So they're essentially acting as a shield for companies, protecting them from the potential legal pitfalls of global hiring.
Exactly. And they're not just reacting to changes, they're trying to anticipate them. They even have something called the Deel Compliance Hub, which provides their clients with up-to-date information on the latest regulatory changes and potential risks.
It's like having a finger on the pulse of global employment law. That kind of peace of mind would be invaluable for any company, especially one that's operating in multiple countries.
It's a huge selling point. They're taking a lot of the uncertainty and guesswork out of the equation, and it all ties back to their overall message of being a trusted partner, not just a software provider.
So they're not just selling a product, they're selling a relationship.
That's a great way to put it. But as we're talking about all of these benefits for companies, I think it's important to also consider the impact on individual workers.
Right. We haven't talked much about that yet. How does a platform like Deel affect the lives of the people who are actually doing the work? Does it make things better for them, or does it create new challenges?
Those are really important questions. And they're questions that we need to explore further as we continue to delve into the world of Deel and the future of work. It really gets you thinking, doesn't it, about what all of this means for the average worker. It's all well and good to talk about the benefits for companies, but what about the people on the grounds, the ones actually doing the work?
Exactly. Does a platform like Deel create more opportunities for them? Does it give them more flexibility? Or does it potentially make them more vulnerable in some ways?
Yeah, that's the big question. And it's not just about deals specifically. It's about this whole trend of remote work and global teams. What does it mean for the future of work itself?
Because it is a trend, isn't it? And it seems like it's only going to become more and more common, so it's important to understand the potential implications, both good and bad.
Absolutely. And I think there are a lot of potential benefits. For example, it could open up opportunities for people in developing countries who might not otherwise have access to those kinds of jobs.
Right, it could break down geographical barriers and create a more level playing field, at least in theory.
But there are also potential downsides, like how do we ensure fair wages and working conditions when you have people working remotely from all over the world? How do we prevent exploitation? These are not easy questions to answer.
And it raises all sorts of interesting questions about things like labor laws and worker protections. Whose laws apply when you have someone working remotely from a different country? How do you enforce those laws? It gets complicated quickly.
It does. It's a whole new world, and we're still figuring it out. But I think it's important to have these conversations to think critically about the potential impact of these technologies, both on companies and on individual workers.
Definitely. And it's not just about the legal and logistical stuff, it's also about the human side of things. What does it mean for our sense of community, our connection to a workplace? Does it create a sense of isolation, or can we find new ways to build connections in this virtual world?
Such good questions. Because work is more than just a paycheck. It's a part of our identity. It's how we connect with others. So how do we maintain those connections in a world where we're increasingly working remotely, potentially with people we never meet face to face?
Right. There's that whole social aspect of work that we often take for granted. And it's not clear how that translates to a remote global workforce.
It's a fascinating puzzle,
Hmm.
and I think it's one that we're only just beginning to solve. But I'm optimistic. I think there are a lot of creative people out there working on these challenges, and I'm excited to see what solutions they come up with.
So, what would you say is the biggest takeaway from our deep dive into Deal today? What should our listeners be thinking about as they process all of this information?
Hmm. Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that the world of work is changing, and it's changing fast. And companies like Deel are at the forefront of that change. They're providing the tools and the infrastructure that are enabling this new way of working.
They're making it possible for companies to tap into a global talent pool, and they're making it easier for people to work from anywhere in the world. That's pretty significant.
It is. But we also need to be mindful of the potential downsides, the challenges that this new world of work presents, both for companies and for individual workers.
Absolutely. It's not all sunshine and roses. There are real risks and challenges that we need to address.
Exactly. And it's up to all of us, companies, workers, policymakers, to figure out how to make this new world of work for everyone. It's about finding the right balance between flexibility, opportunity, and fairness.
It's about creating a future of work that is sustainable, equitable, and ultimately beneficial for everyone involved. That's the real challenge, and it's a challenge that's worth taking on.
I agree. So for our listeners who are interested in learning more about Deel and exploring these questions further, I would definitely recommend visiting their website. They have a ton of great information, including detailed breakdowns of their services, case studies, and even a blog with some thought-provoking articles on the future of work.
Yeah, they've got a really comprehensive website. It's definitely worth checking out. And I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive today.
It has been a deep dive. I've really enjoyed exploring this topic with you.
Me too. Thanks for joining me.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Deel and the future of work. We'll see you next time.